Hi, I'm Kingsley Hendrickse, and welcome to Chicago Crystal.
Welcome, Kingsley, to Chicago Crystal. I am super excited to have you on. I've been following your project for a while, so I can't wait to just dive into some of this.
Yes, thanks very much, and very happy to be here.
Awesome. Just to kind of set the scene a little bit, how did you get into programming?
So it's been quite a journey for me, really, over the years. When I first left university, I didn't do any kind of hardcore computing at university. I actually did modern languages with business, and I had a side module of computing. So when I left university, it was in the late 90s, so I was looking for a job, and I'm from the north of England, and there really wasn't many jobs around at that time. And the most attractive thing at the time was call center work. So all of these call centers were popping up around the northeast for various different cable companies and things like that. So I actually started working for a cable company straight away, and I knew quite a lot about computers and about internet just from personal interest. And I sort of moved from answering regular calls to answering exclusively calls about the internet and about IT problems. And that led me into IT, and I sort of had the side interest for a long time in programming and in computing and in computers. And I kind of wished that really I'd just done a course at university on computers, but I didn't. I chose languages, and but my lifelong passion was actually to work in computers.
That's pretty awesome. Now, when you say you took languages in university, do you mean like you took Spanish or English, or what did you do in university?
Yes, actually, when I say to people I took languages, they immediately assume some kind of programming languages because of my long history with working with computers. But actually, no, it was modern languages. So it was mainly German, Italian. I did some module in Japanese, and I did a side of business studies. And also, I was doing a module in computing because the university had quite a good computer studio there.
Oh, okay. What I don't really know much about the university system in London, but so where did you go to university? And when you graduated, is that the same thing as having kind of a degree in the US if you know about the US system?
Yes, it's a degree. It's a bachelor honours degree that I received. It's a 4-year course. And when I left university, I was thinking maybe I'd become a translator, maybe I'd do something in language space, because I really like learning languages and traveling and meeting people. It's great. And I guess computer languages do have some parallels with the spoken languages. And this is what really sort of helps me, I think, with my programming, because I have this other set of languages to fall back on as well.
That's pretty cool. I noticed in your project, even for its early stage of development, that you already have some translation and multilingual features built in, which was somewhat surprising to see, but we'll probably get to that a little bit later. I noticed kind of around the 2000s, you kind of moved into the IT and programming space. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So my first job actually in the space after I left the cable companies and the customer service type roles was I basically moved to London. That's where all the action was happening. There wasn't really many jobs in the Northeast. I decided to find something in programming or in IT or anything really, just to to get me out of the Northeast. So I moved to London and I started with a company called eToys, which was a startup. So this is the dot-com bubble time, a lot of excitement, a lot of different technologies floating around. Back in those days, if you could do HTML, you were a programmer. and that's all you really needed at the time, which has changed a lot since then, obviously. So I got a job working as a tester in a sort of retail company selling toys online. And that was my first experience of working in a sort of professional atmosphere, doing what people considered programming then, which was HTML markup and building websites and that kind of thing. And that was really the sort of the launch pad for where I moved for the rest of my career in programming. I moved from there to various other companies and moved gradually from testing into full-time development. And actually, I really enjoyed the testing aspect. So for a while, I was doing both, and then maybe I'd take one role as pure development, one role as testing, sometimes a combined role, and then eventually I just moved straight, into full-time development roles, which I've done ever since sort of the last 10 or 12 years. I've been doing just mostly pure development.
That's pretty cool. I've worked at some companies where we have dedicated testing, and in the industry, at least in the jobs I've held, we've moved away from dedicated testing to developers writing their own testing. And there is an interesting kind of side effect of that, which is that I feel like a lot of stuff is less tested today than it was back when there were dedicated testers. But there is an interesting dynamic between like the incentives of testers and the incentives of developers. And that mostly comes to like corporations and what verticals you're under and who your boss is and a lot of other things. But I kind of miss having someone who's like their concentration, like their effort is just spent on like making sure the product is tested well. I think it's something that we're somewhat moving away from as an industry, and I kind of miss it.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, an interesting area as well, actually. There are, in the early days, there was quite a clear difference between each role. And I guess a lot of software development was in more of like a waterfall style, where you had a big section of time allocated to different things. So for analysis, you do all that, and then you do all the development, then you do all the testing. And one of the problems with that, obviously, which people have now realized, is by the time you get to the end of that rather long period of time after it's been developed, if it's full of bugs and if there are things which weren't developed as they were expected, so the client actually didn't quite want what was delivered, or something changed and they actually want something different now, you'd already spent all the time and all the money and all the effort, building the first thing, and stuff changes. So that's where more of an agile philosophy comes in. But developers only have a finite amount of time to do things, and obviously development is very important, and you've got to solve problems, and there's a certain amount of testing involved while you're working, while you're developing something. But yes, there is, I think there's still a vital set of skills that belong to that testing area, which developers don't necessarily possess. You may find testers who are very analytical, and they think in very interesting ways and can try testing things in ways that a developer wouldn't even think about. And it's not always because it's a skill gap. Sometimes it's just the mindset. When you're developing, you've been given a set of requirements and you're building that thing, and so your mind's kind of focused on that and not on finding all these different niche bugs and things. And so as things are moving more and more towards the developer being multi-skilled, I guess they call it kind of like full stack development these days, there's a lot more on the developer's plate, and it seems to be even more and more being piled on. And sometimes it's maybe it's too much. Not all developers are going to want to do this huge array of skills that are now needed. And actually, thinking back to some of my early days, so after I left eToys, this toy company, I went to another consultancy called Net Decisions, which was a consultancy building various software, and they just sent me all over the place. But after that, I joined a company called Thoughtworks, which you might know. And this was an amazing experience in terms of learning Agile. They had phenomenal people, really talented people there. And one of the guys that really had a big impression on me was a guy called Dan North, who he actually taught me TDD, test-driven development or test-driven design. And from that, I've always used this methodology moving forward when I've been coding. And this was just a great sort of opportunity to apply testing during my regular development. You find a lot of people who write code, once it's written, it's very hard to go back and add tests to it. So if you do it while you're coding, then it gets done, and it helps you focus the design so that it's testable. And that was one of the big things in Agile, back in those days.
Yeah. I mean, I started a little later than you in the industry, and it was a very big thing even when I started. That, and everyone was talking about lean when I started. We read multiple books on lean. Like that was, I think it was a little post TDD, but it was a very big emphasis when I was kind of the first 4 years or something when I was getting into the industry. It is kind of interesting how the industry's changed. I'm interested if it will swing kind of back and forth, if we'll go from full stack developers and generalists to specializations, or from TDD to water, or if we're progressing in a certain way, or if there'll be certain swings, but I don't think we'll know until it happens.
Yeah, it's hard to say really. I think things do go in circular phases over time. Some things that were really good at one time may fall out of fashion, and then new things kind of come in. But then the things that were really, really valuable, that were really good, I think those things tend to resurface over time, even if they've dropped away temporarily because there's some shiny new exciting thing. Eventually people pick the practical things, the things that really work, especially if you have a long career in programming. You tend to use and reuse the tools that made the most sense and were most effective over time.
Yeah, I like Donald Knuth's quote, if it becomes too popular or becomes too popular too fast, it's probably wrong. And I'm not sure that's always right, but I just like Donald Knuth, or is it Donald Knuth? I don't really know how to pronounce his last name, but his quotes are great. Yeah. So how did you get from Thoughtworks to Crystal?
Well, at Thoughtworks, Thoughtworks was amazing, really enjoyed it. But one of the things about it was there was a lot of work, and it's a consultancy, so the work was all over the place. So I just had to go where the work was, and sometimes this was various clients in London, sometimes this was abroad. And when you're traveling a lot, and when you're doing working for a consultancy, it's all about moving about. And over time, I just felt that if I was going to be moving around so much anyway, I'd rather move away from being like a full-time permanent employee and get a little bit more freedom. So I became a contractor just so I could choose more of the places that I wanted to go and areas of London that I wanted to work in. Because, often I was living in one end of London, and for some reason I always found that the office that I had to work in was completely the other end of London. And it didn't seem to matter, when I moved house to whichever part of London, the job was always on the opposite side. So I tried to remedy that. I became a contractor, did a lot of freelancing and a lot of contract work. And the first sort of major language that I fell in love with really was Ruby, which is maybe not surprising since we're talking about Crystal and the similarities that Crystal and Ruby have. It's quite a natural progression, I think, to move from Ruby to a Crystal. But in my day job in those days, it was all Java. There was JavaScript, and it was very difficult to persuade anyone to do anything in Ruby, to do like a commercial project in Ruby. And so Ruby was like my hobby, and I made loads of projects in Ruby. I attended loads of the conferences that were started up in Ruby, and I was quite active in the Ruby communities in the early days. I think it was about the time when Ruby on Rails came out, when the Ruby community just exploded, and it started to be a bit too populated for me, and so I sort of withdrew a little bit from the Ruby community then. There was like hundreds and hundreds of people, in the IRC channels, and we didn't really have that community feeling after a while, because there were so many people who would just turn up into a community channel and say, like, how do I build a forum? Or, how do I build this ginormous, huge thing? And a lot of trolling going on and things like that. So I took a little step back from that. And as I was progressing with my Ruby projects on the side, now and again I got to a point where I felt I needed more performance out of Ruby than I was getting. And I was searching for ways to remedy this. And one of the ways you can do it is, drop down to C and write the things that need to be more performant in C as bindings and things like that. But I didn't really enjoy working in C. And then I happened to catch a presentation by someone, I don't remember who it was now, and they were writing extensions for Ruby in this language called D. And I'd never heard of D before, so I was quite interested, but it looked quite like Java, and I was doing Java as my day job then. So I thought, this looks much more accessible, this D language, I'll have a look. So I started playing around with D, and then I was thinking, well, you know what, this D language is actually pretty cool. Why don't I, put Ruby down for a little bit and give D a chance? And so I started building things. I built a few basic experiments, if you like it. I built actually a D tanks game as well, which is on my GitHub. And this is inspired by one of the projects that helps teach Agile, where you incrementally improve like a robot AI, and then you get a certain amount of time to build your robot AI. And then when the time's up, they battle it out in an arena. And then the winning robot obviously gets all the glory. And then you get a few more iterations to improve it and see if you can correct the problems that led to your previous defeat. And this was great. And at this time, I started running the D meetup in London, which was kindly hosted by Skills Matter. Fortunately, I think they've had to close their doors now. But yeah, so this was great. And we had a full-on robot battle in one of these sessions, which was really exciting. It was fantastic. So yeah, D was interesting, and I even reviewed a D book and ended up being included in the book. And then one of my friends at work, he was just casually, saying, "Oh, Kingsley, you like Ruby. Have you seen Crystal?" And I looked at it and I saw this Ruby-like language, and I got a little bit excited. I was like, "Wow, this looks pretty awesome!" And it was typed, which was attractive because I was working in Java. There was lots of types, and it was fast, and that was something that I had been trying to find a solution to. But at that time, I think it wasn't quite ready for me. It was still in its quite early stages. So I looked at it, got a bit excited about it, but ultimately, I don't think I picked it up just then. Because I went from D, and then I went into a little bit of Elixir and playing with different functional programming languages. And it was about this time I moved into Scala, and I really like Scala, and I started doing contract work as a Scala developer. And for the last 6 or probably nearly 7 years now, I've been doing Scala as my day job instead of Java.
Oh, really? Interesting.
And yeah, and during that period, at some point, something came up again somewhere about Crystal, and I took another look, and I thought, wow, this has really progressed. and now I can actually build something. I just started replacing every time I would need to do a little task, like a little automation task at work. Instead of doing it in Ruby, I would do it in Crystal. And
Oh, wow.
because with Ruby, I found it was a really helpful tool, and this is because I was never allowed to use it like for a real project at work. So I always just snuck it in here and there, to automate things, to write some testing, to write some support tools and things like that. So I just started doing all these in Crystal instead, and I hadn't done this in D, so that was kind of telling me that maybe D is not the thing that I'm going to spend a lot of time in. But Crystal seemed to be. So I just started doing more and more Crystal until I got to a point where I was very proficient with all the basics of Crystal. And then I decided I'd start building bigger things. So I started building some web things using Camel, and various different tools that were available in Crystal. And now, as you probably see on my GitHub, I've got quite a few Crystal projects. Obviously, my largest one being Sushi Chain, which was an adventure as well.
Right before we get to Sushi Chain, I've been observing part of your GitHub, and I love human hash. I've never seen that before. Why don't you explain human hash for those who haven't seen your GitHub before this podcast?
Well, as with many things in the crypto space, many things are not very readable, and you get lots of identifiers, things that maybe we'll touch on later, which are things like addresses, which are all alphanumeric kind of strings and things like that. And they're just very hard to remember. So anything that, in the space, which gives you a little bit more readability, it's a very big win, because people, we find it much easier to remember phrases and words than alphanumeric characters strung together. And you'll find a lot of things in the crypto and blockchain space are those. So I was actually looking for a way to identify an ID in the mining system that I have in Sushi Chain, which we'll probably talk about later. And I couldn't find anything that would let me convert this alphanumeric series of characters into some human readable form. And I dug around and I remembered that I'd seen something like that in Ruby before. So I found the Ruby version and I ported it over to Crystal. And interestingly, the Ruby version is actually implementation was actually a port of another port, which was based on another port, which is actually a Python thing. So I think I mentioned in that one that I can't really take any credit for this port because it's everyone else has basically done all the work. I just moved it into into a different language. But the basic concept is you take any alphanumeric string and you chunk it up into a number of bytes, and then you have a dictionary of words and you allocate bytes to specific words. So rather than a long alphanumeric number, you could pass this into the library and it would spit out instead something like alpha 20, mockingbird 12. And you can have different formats. You can have like dashes between the words. But essentially, it's a repeatable set of words which represent that ID, and you can convert back and forth between them. And you can convert UUIDs, all those kind of things. You can convert into human words, which was great fun. Actually, it was a great little project to work on.
Yeah, it seemed very useful to me. I had a question and a comment about the project specifically, which is that in looking at the implementation, it seems like the word list is not, it's just random. It's somewhat arbitrary and it's not universal. I didn't see like a doc line about it being, kind of something that was shared. So you'd have to have that specific library or that specific word list to actually be able to, share those IDs with someone else. Would it make sense to use something that's more uniform or universal, kind of like the NATO phonetic alphabet or something like that, and then people could re-implement the library with a shared word list in which they could encode and decode like with you?
Yeah, that's actually a good idea. It's possible to use any dictionary, really. And I think some of these libraries have various different sets of dictionaries. But yeah, you're right. You could have a shared dictionary of anything, really. And as long as you're applying the same dictionary, then it's going to work. The reason we have the current one is just because of porting it from the Ruby version. And I think this word list has actually survived several ports, and I didn't I didn't change it. I just kept the
Nice.
original port.
So we've talked about Sushi Coin a little bit. I really want to talk about that, but how did you get to cryptocurrency, and how did you find this as an area that you wanted to like both contribute to, and how did you get interested in it?
Some of this, I think, spans back to my work in banking. So for many years as a contractor, I worked in quite a lot of banks around London. So I worked in Santander, UBS, HSBC, Deutsche Bank, Barclays. And in all those banks, I did a lot of work building internal banking systems, building supply chain finance systems, trading systems, private wealth platforms. And all of these experiences were leading me to sort of understand the whole banking and finance sector. And it is quite institutionalized, I guess is the word. There are some banks which control a lot of the flow of money. And cryptocurrency for me was kind of a breath of fresh air in this space, because it was like the promise of a decentralized, non-central, no central body was controlling it as the design of blockchain. So cryptocurrency I found very interesting, and I kind of didn't understand the difference at this time when I first sort of started learning about it. Didn't really understand the difference between blockchain and cryptocurrency. For me at that time, they were just like one thing. And like I guess many people did at that time, I got caught up in the hype of cryptocurrency, and a few of us, like four of us, we got together and we bought a miner, and because we thought, okay, this looks really awesome. We're kind of tech guys, we should be involved in this because it's cool, without really knowing too much about it at the time. So we figured, right, let's get ourselves a miner. We'll start mining, and if we make any coins, we'll just divide them up between us, and we'll see how it goes. So the first thing we did was hunt down a place to buy a miner, and really the only place at that time. I mean, this was probably like in 2012, 2013.
Oh,
something around about that time.
Quite early in there.
Yeah,
you were
it was
early. Yeah.
Yes, it was. It was quite an early time in the grand scheme of things, I suppose. So we got this miner from China, and it took 9 months to arrive. In fact, we had tremendous problems, and I think what was happening was the mining company, they were building these custom ASIC chipsets, which are very efficient for solving crypto algorithms, so very, very good for hashing and for mining. But they were being designed and manufactured in China, and I think America hadn't quite got there yet with its sort of manufacturing, and a lot of stuff was being ordered from China. So we think what was happening was they were actually mining on the rig. So we said, yes, we've ordered it, we paid for it, and it was quite expensive. I think it was over £1,000 to buy it. And I think they mined on it for 9 months, and then they shipped it to us. So it got stuck at customs somewhere in Hong Kong, and my wife is she's like a British-born Chinese, so I had to get hold of some of her family in Hong Kong to go and get it unstuck from customs for me in order to get it shipped over here.
Wow.
And I think also they tried to confiscate it when it arrived in the UK.
Really?
At UK customs. So only eventually we actually got it. And one thing was it was incredibly noisy. So immediately I was like, I can't have this in my house. It's too noisy. My wife will go mad. So luckily, one of our friends had a garage out the back, and so he set it up in the garage, and we just started it going, and left it really for quite a few months, and then every now and again, my friend would just send us over some Bitcoin into our wallets, and we wouldn't think much of it really. We just, we were getting a little bit of Bitcoin every now and again. And then one day my friend, and this was probably like after several months, he said, look, the electricity bill is costing more than the value of this coin that we're mining. So I think I'm going to, turn it off now. So he turned it off, and I kind of checked to see what the prices were. And, I had a few Bitcoin out of that. I can't remember how many. And I think I might have bought a few of some friends as well. So I probably had like 12 Bitcoin or something like that. And just they weren't really worth much then, So we're thinking, I've made a loss, because by the time we count the electricity bill and then the price of my share of the rig, I was like, this is rubbish. I just put it to one side and didn't think about it. Again, I think I sold a bunch of them. I wasted a bunch of Bitcoins on frivolous stuff, whatever you could get on the internet, at the time. I just, wasted them on some stuff. And then, a few years later, like probably 2016, 2017, something like that. I just happened, one of my friends was contacting me and saying, "Oh, have you seen the price of, of this Bitcoin thing? It's taking off." And I looked and I was like, wow, it's worth a lot. And then I was like rushing around, where was that hard drive? Trying to find out if I had any left. But I didn't really, I didn't find too many. I just found a little bit. Then I was wishing, I wish I hadn't just squandered it early on. And then, some of my friends who are in crypto would say, you weren't a true believer. You should have been a true believer. Then you'd have been a Bitcoin billionaire. Like, you were in almost at the early part to be one of those, but you wasted the chance. So,
oh wow,
yeah. But yeah, so that's my first sort of interest in cryptocurrency came from there. Then obviously I studied a lot more, figured out what was going on. It's a very complicated area. It's very much based on perception and all these things. And then I realized the difference between crypto and blockchain, and that's what sort of started me off on this path, really.
So I've only dove into Bitcoin a few times to mostly learn the technical aspects of it, but it is a really complicated space. And so we're kind of probably going to skip a little bit of the cryptocurrency or the blockchain kind of explanations, but let's jump straight into Sushi Coin now. So why Sushi Coin? What were you trying to solve in this space, and how did you come to there's a lot of things involved in Sushi Coin. So why Sushi Coin?
So originally it was called Sushi Coin, and then so we rebranded it as Sushi Chain, and there was a transition there, which I'm going to tell you about. So at the very start of my thinking around this, I was just wanting to explore blockchain, wanted to understand the technology and how it works. And also I was a bit frustrated with all of the other offerings that were out there if you wanted to do more than just exchange cryptocurrency. And so one of the earlier projects, Ethereum, which is popular now, and it has many different functionalities, and some of those are things like smart contracts, automatically transferring money around, and also it has a focus on building dApps, distributed applications. And this is what sort of caught my interest, because in the mobile phone space, for example, these native apps are like so popular, and even as time progresses and new apps come out, there's still a huge demand for these apps. And I was very interested in how could you build more of a decentralized application. So an application that was not holding all your data on like a centralized server that belonged to somebody else who could, sell your data, control your data. So I think it was mostly that aspect that first got me interested. And like I said, I was playing around with Ethereum. I was playing around with a few of the earlier blockchains, and they were just crazy expensive if you wanted to do anything. Every time you make a transaction on a blockchain, you have to pay a fee. And I know some of the more modern chains that have come out since, some of those don't have a fee, but a lot of them have a fee. All the big ones have a fee, and that can be incredibly expensive for any kind of transaction you want to make. So that was one of the main things I was trying to address as well.
I had a question about the fees. I've been watching some of your tutorials and messing around with testnet, and it seems like you have to, when you actually send a transaction out to the nodes, you get to assign your fee, which I thought was interesting. I thought the nodes would actually have fees. Do the nodes filter on only fees that they'll accept, or like how does it even work?
Yeah, exactly. So you pay a fee in order to send a transaction. So it's like your postage, if you like, the postage stamp equivalent. And in Sushi Chain, there's a base set of fees. You can call a command that will show you how much each thing costs. But if you want to pay more than the fee, you can. And the more you pay, the more priority your transaction receives.
Oh, okay. That's pretty interesting. And one of the, that is awesome and interesting. Can you describe a little bit about smart assets? What are smart assets?
So in a lot of other blockchains, Ethereum, for example, they have smart contracts, and Ethereum was the first one to, come up with the system of smart contracts, which is basically a contractual agreement between two parties, which is automatically executed when certain conditions are met. And in some places, these are actually legally binding. Like I think when I was in Malta, they were just passing the laws there to make it legally binding. And I think it is in some other places as well. But the problem with smart contracts is anyone who wants to build a centralized app and have some level of autonomous code running, the only way to do it is to use a smart contract. And not every situation calls for a transfer of money or tokens from one place to another. But smart contracts are used in order to create this logic. And sometimes there's no real transfer of money happening. It's just like a data thing. And writing smart contracts is incredibly expensive because they're so easy to mess up and get wrong, which can be catastrophic. Like if you're running a business, or if you've got a lot of currency. And there have been various issues where bugs in the actual underlying infrastructure have also caused people to lose money. And even just to get someone to audit your smart contract, even just writing it. And it's very expensive. So for every single computation that you include in your smart contract, there's a fee for, basically. So it also kind of hampers your creativity, because you're never coding to be creative. You're always coding to have the least amount of computational things in your codes, so that you're paying the least amount of money for them. And when you execute it, the contract, obviously you get charged for for this. And
Got it.
Sushi Chain, I really believe that the decentralized apps are not purely things that need money transfer. And there are many types of apps that you can build that just need autonomous logic to be running. And one of the areas I'm quite interested in is gaming. So I do a lot of make a lot of reference to like game objects and things like that, which could be modeled as smart assets on Sushi Chain. And so in that respect, a smart asset, it has a lot of parallels to a smart contract, but it's not a financial thing. You can't do any financial thing with it. It's all about data, and it's about sending transactions into the chain which change properties on data and execute autonomous logic. And also you can chain these together, so you can have many assets which are all chained together, which react autonomously based on state changes. And these things are all modeled in the blockchain, decentralized, and obviously can be monetized. But the whole point of smart assets is autonomous logic executing in the code publicly, visibly. No one can change it. It's immutable. Developers can obviously make newer versions of it. And that's one way of building decentralized apps. This part of the code is still under development. There's a lot of things. It's a lot big complex area. There's lots of things there. But the other main way of building decentralized apps is you host your own app running inside a node. So you kind of extend the node. So you start your own node up, a Sushi Chain node, and you build your app inside the node. And there's a whole set of callbacks and things. And then you have full control over your node. And if you want to scale, you just start up more nodes. And all these nodes are just hooked into the blockchain, into the main system. And that way you can start or stop or change however you like. And you get full control over it.
That's pretty cool. I would say one thing I really liked about your CLI, or just the design of the app, kind of diving more on the technical features, is that the actual, both you use a lot of things inside Sushi Chain, which I can really easily understand, including there's just a lot of JSON, just a lot of things that seem really easy, but the CLI is really easy to use. And I haven't done Bitcoin in a while, but looked through it and stuff, but it didn't seem as easy. It's really nice. I like your interface. And how do you do you have any thoughts on the design of the CLI, or how to use the app? Did you guys put effort into making sure that was a good experience?
Yeah, so we did focus on trying to make it as easy as possible and as understandable as possible to use the CLI. At the moment it's the primary interface to using it. And we've actually, the Sushi Chain itself is split into 3 of these CLIs. So we have the miner, which has a set of commands to start the miner up. You've got the core node itself, which is the node that you start up that connects everything up. And then you have the client itself, which is how you interact with the node. And so typically you would start up Sushi, which is the node process, and then you'd want to interact with it using the client. And many common things that you'd want to do, we tried to make easy. So things like checking the wallet balance, things like creating a wallet. And most of the menu system we have is you have a top level menu, and then within that menu you can add additional commands to get sub menus and sub items. And that whole system actually is just built with the regular built-in Crystal option parser. A few people have asked me in the past about this, are you using a certain library for it, like Admiral or one of those other ones? But actually no, it was purely written in the option parser. And actually, the very start of this project, when it was called Sushi Coin, was actually started off by a Japanese developer called Taichiro. And he was interested in blockchain, and I was interested in blockchain. And I was building a blockchain, my own one, in Crystal. And he was building Sushi Coin in Crystal. And someone just said to me one day, "Hey, have you seen Sushi Coin?" and I see you're building a blockchain. Have you seen Sushi Coin? And I was like, no, I haven't seen it. So I contacted Taichiro and I said, hey, I'll have a look at your chain. You have a look at mine, and we'll see, if there's some level of collaboration we can do. And so we looked at each other's work, and we found out that actually we had very similar coding styles, and we're almost building the same thing. So we decided, let's pool our effort. And so I started contributing a lot of testing, a lot of automated tests into Sushi Chain, because there was a lot of the testing side missing. And then started broadening its scope from just a coin to a whole ecosystem.
Oh, okay.
So the plan was for it to be able to build decentralized apps, to have like an app store, to be able to connect your own nodes in, build your own apps, and also have smart assets and build autonomous logic into your decentralized apps, and sort of have this whole ecosystem. After a while, though, Taichiro, who's a Japanese developer working for Yahoo in Japan, sort of got overtaken with his job. I think he maybe got promoted, and he had a lot to focus on. And so I decided just to continue solo on Sushi Chain and search for some open source contributors to give me a hand. And I have to say, over the course of maybe a year and a half, there was various lurkers in my channels. So I had a Slack channel, and some of the people who were lurking in there, they were actually paying attention, but just not really saying much. And I came to need to start implementing some quite difficult things. So some OpenSSL crypto libraries, ECDSA bindings, and various things that Crystal didn't really have bindings for and weren't built into the language, but things I needed. And then one of the lurkers in the channel happened to mention that he was good at C code. So I immediately was like, oh, that I really need someone who can understand, the C code, so we can build these bindings. And this guy was John Ferris, and he's been a legend, helping me with a lot of the underlying C binding work. In fact, we decided together that we needed a algorithm that will regulate the miners. So when you're mining, there's difficulty levels, and the more power you have in your mining rig, the more power that you can put into mining, and which at the early stages of Sushi Chain meant more blocks were being mined more quickly. And then there was a lot of different, attacks, if you like, that you could do, or I don't know, tricks that you could mine really hard, and then you could turn on a trickle of mining, and the difficulty would sort of return, and then you'd hit it again hard, difficulty would shoot up, and you'd sort of game it that way to get more money out of the blocks that way. So a way around that is to implement an algorithm that regulates it, and these have like fantastic names. And the one that we modeled ours on was called Dark Gravity Wave. So we invented Crystal Dark Gravity Wave, or Dark Crystal Gravity Wave, whatever we called it. And John did a lot of work in that space and really ironed out a really nice algorithm.
So this comes I have a list of notes here, and you hit a lot of things I want to talk about, but in general, I recommend Crystal people, and I'm like, I never do this in any other language, but Crystal is so easy to integrate with C comparatively to other languages that I feel like bringing in other libraries is not as hard in Crystal. And the second one is, I've always been told, don't roll your own crypto. So how do both of those kind of come together in your project? How, do you guys roll any of your own crypto, or how do you aggregate the knowledge to do your own crypto? And how have you, what's your experience in kind of bringing C programming and C libraries and kind of the tools you need to build this project in Crystal?
Yeah, that's good questions there. Yes, this is a guiding philosophy. Don't roll your own crypto, and in fact, we don't. We always use tried and tested crypto. The very early versions of Sushi Chain we did write our own crypto for a couple of things. They weren't present in Crystal, and it seemed like it would be nice to follow the RFC for certain things and just write it. Like ECDSA, for example, we wrote that in Crystal directly. But then we found out that it wasn't compatible with many other libraries. And one of the things that I really wanted to do was have compatibility. So I wanted like a JavaScript miner to be able to work with Sushi Chain. I wanted JavaScript wallet, or a wallet written in any other language, like in Ruby or in whatever language you like, to be compatible with the core programs of Sushi Chain. And it's incredible, the variance in different languages. So even though every language might say, yes, we support X, Y, or Z standard, there's all these nuances and differences, and compatibility was quite hard to achieve. So we got rid of all of the non-standard crypto, and the first pass was to use OpenSSL, which is, I have to say, an absolute beast. It's ginormous. It's so complicated. It's unbelievable. And it has many, many lower-level functions, and then many higher-level functions that they've improved over time. And with every release, they introduce different things. And one of the main issues we had with that was Crystal didn't really have a consistent support for OpenSSL. So some things were available, some parts of OpenSSL had been implemented in Crystal, some algorithms were there, some weren't. All the ones I wanted were not there. So I had to start building these C bindings to things like ECDSA and various other complicated crypto libraries that are written in C. And so John helped massively in this space to write those. And I'm not really a low-level native expert. So my experiences, probably as we've talked about, are building systems at a high level of language. So using functional programming, using Scala, using Ruby, high-level languages, and not so much on the low-level C, C++ kind of things. So for me, initially, it was quite difficult to port things, C libraries, into Crystal. But over time, I sort of got a lot better at it, and I started finding where the pitfalls were, where the caveats were, where the things that I need to pay attention to were, what things I had to do manually, what things I could generate with like BindGen and things like that.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, eventually, I sort of got into the swing of doing it, and then I found it quite easy to port quite a few things. But actually, we did not stay with OpenSSL because it was so complicated. We actually moved to a different set of crypto based on a different curve. So originally, Sushi Chain had kind of followed Bitcoin's architecture, and it was using the same kind of crypto curves that Bitcoin was using. But we moved to a completely different set of curves.
This is libsodium, right?
Yes, exactly. Actually, the libsodium library also, even though it's kind of billed as being a cut down, kind of more lightweight crypto library, it was still a bit too big for us. And the Crystal port of it also was missing many of the things that I wanted. So actually, we're using Monocipher, which is a very, very cut down crypto library. And I'm finding it fantastic, actually. It's so easy to understand. It's very lean. It does the job very well, and it's very efficient. And so we switched to using that, I think, last year sometime.
Okay,
yeah, and that's been great. And again, someone else had written the bindings for that, so that was another bonus because I didn't have to, start from scratch. Which was great.
I've noticed you guys have integrated with a lot of C libraries. I've actually both recommended people take a look at Sushi Chain, and I've used Sushi Chain as just like a reference and like how to do C bindings, just different things about like make files and if you pull something or just like I think you guys are one of the larger apps written in Crystal, and you guys have a lot of complexity. So it's a good reference point for a lot of things. I'm really curious, as your project has grown, you're one of the few kind of larger projects, at least open source out there. Have you noticed any difficulties or anything that, Crystal is kind of different with other languages? Anything that's a benefit or maybe even a detriment into having a large project with Crystal?
There's definitely some things to bear in mind with Crystal, and that is when you have a larger project, there's a lot of areas to work on, and because Crystal is still like a growing language, so it's not like it's at like 1.0 and everything's super stable. So there is various releases have broken or have caused us to quite largely refactor many areas of the code base with releases. And we kind of made a decision that every time there's a new release, we would just try and catch up with that release as soon as possible. So we always try and stay on the latest release and not kind of fix on an older release. This has had benefits and a few downsides, but mostly benefits in that, we get the new stuff that's coming and we stay up to date. So any problems that we have, when we feed it back to to the Crystal channels and say, oh, how we've got this problem, people find it more easily give us help because we're on the latest version. Like if we're like 5 versions behind, it's much harder to get support for, I think. But if you have a large code base and a substantial change occurs, then you could be spending a lot of time rewriting things, and that has happened a few times. Some changes have caused us to almost touch every file in the code base fix things, and that's just one of the risks, I suppose, you take when the language is still growing and things are still changing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm really interested in so many different topics we have here, but I'm trying to pick the ones I want to hear most from you. One thing I'm really interested in is concurrency in Crystal, and I see you guys are using a library, or I think I see that. But how you're a fairly large project, you have a fair amount of complexity, and I believe the workers themselves are done concurrently. What are the difficulties around that? How have you guys found developing that? Do you have any thoughts on it?
So originally, and actually currently, the miner is the thing which needs to spawn many instances in order to create load, in order to do more work, if you like. So we have this way of saying, when you start the miner, how many processes do you want to run? And in the very early stages, we did this with Crystal's built-in threads. This is before the concurrency stuff came out. And it didn't really work very well because we only really managed to increase the load like a tiny bit. A lot of it was absorbed inside the same sort of thread, like a system thread. And it wasn't very effective. You could say, I want to start this process with 5,000 threads, and it wouldn't really do much apart from maybe lock up now and again. So then we wrote this library which spawns many processes, and it's using process fork. And this starts up a new sort of sub-process for however many processes you say you want to run. So I want to run 10 processes. I'll get process fork will give me 10 of these, and this will put load on the CPU. Sushi Chain's a CPU mining blockchain, which means that the algorithms that we use for mining are optimized only for CPU. A lot of other chains, they let you mine via GPU, which is a lot more efficient, and you can get a lot more load going through the GPU than you can through the CPU. But the problem with that is then you get people buying these ginormous rigs, and then it's more about who's got the biggest rig rather than an equality. Because I really believe that blockchain's philosophy originally, especially with Bitcoin, was not to have ginormous rigs of miners everywhere, but it would be like truly distributed, and there'd be many people mining a little bit, not these ginormous rigs that you have these days. And so CPU mining is our attempt to stop this ginormous rig mining by restricting it to CPU rather than machines with 50 GPUs or whatever, which obviously are super expensive. So in CPU terms, starting more processors means more load on the CPU, and that has been working great. But then there's an announcement that Crystal's new concurrency was coming, and just before it was kind of released into like a more mainstream working situation, I was thinking, right, I need to get on top of this, and I tried myself a little bit to play around with multi-threading to get the mining doing multi-threading, but I found it quite hard because there wasn't a lot of documentation or information about it. And I found Lorenzo Baresti's awesome video on the subject, and immediately I was like, right, I need to get hold of this guy and see if he can help me. So luckily he's also in London, and we managed to arrange a pairing session, and he very kindly spent a couple of hours with me going pair coding on Sushi Chain to implement the start of a multi-threaded a miner. But it's not finished yet. It's still in progress, but that's the way we're going with that.
Really? That's really cool. Yeah, Lorenzo was very awesome. I had him on the podcast and really enjoyed chatting with him. That's really cool, the direction you're going. I'm glad to hear that at least I'm not sure if this is not possible in Ruby, but I'm really glad to hear that Crystal is kind of providing the tools and that you're able to do that. All right, that's pretty awesome. Where can people find Sushi Chain if they want to get involved, if you need help, or if they just want to start participating just in mining or getting coins?
So the best way is, first of all, to check out the website, sushichain.io, and you'll see on there some introductory information about Sushi Chain. You'll see links to the GitHub repo. You'll also see a link to our Telegram channel, and you'll also see there on our Twitter, I have various videos and posts linked from all the exhibitions I went to in Silicon Valley, in Malta, and I took we had big stands with all the graphics for some of the games that I'm building as well on there, and a lot of information on there. And the primary sort of public contact is to come to the Telegram channel. That's where we're chatting publicly. And if you want to help out in terms of development, then the best way is to drop me a link, drop me an email, or ping me through Telegram. And we have our own Slack developers channel where a lot of the guys who are regular contributors, people that you see on the website, that's where we have regular chats about everything we're building. All the blockchain explorers, the contributors are building, Christian is building some stuff, Christian Kikeza, and we've had Chris Watson helping us out on some UI stuff. Obviously, we've had people like Bar Hoffish from Neurolegion giving us input as well from a security perspective. And also Aaron Brownell, who's also been a legend, helping us develop things for Sushi Chain, refactoring and things like that. So we have quite a few developers helping on and off who come in and out when they have time. So be very grateful for any help from anyone in the community who's interested in this space to come contact me, talk to me in Telegram channel, and I'll be happy to point you in the direction of all the work that needs doing still.
And can they find you in the internet channel with the same name you have on GitHub?
Yes, in Telegram, I'm Kingsley H pretty much everywhere. I'm also in the Gitter channel in Crystal and in various other channels. I'm sure you'll be able to find me if you look at one of those channels for sure.
Okay. Awesome. And we'd love to have you back. There are so many different topics here. I'm really interested in your thoughts on RethinkDB and Mint and a bunch of other things. So if we get a chance, I'd love to bring you back online and to chat more. I am Jack Thorne with Chicago Crystal. You can find us at chicagocrystal.org, or you can find me on the internet as 123 or WONTRUEFREE. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
A big thank you to our producer, Christy Flores, who edits these podcasts, and our DJ, Bill Wesley, who provides the tracks and samples for these episodes. This was an episode of Chicago Crystal, building community and getting stuff made in our favorite language. We'll see you soon.